Hello everyone, my name's Pete and I don't like Apple products, AI powered anything or MMOs, so you can rest assured that this script hasn't been touched by ChatGPT or anything of the sort, which is probably obvious in its amateur quality. I'm slowly working through a list of MMOs to check out the new player experience and to see if I can find something I genuinely enjoy, and so far, I've genuinely enjoyed the journey through a variety of games more than anything. You can join me on this journey by pressing subscribe, and you can make me feel bad about not making these more often by joining this list of Patreon supporters, who quite frankly have more money than sense if you ask me. Today's video is brought to you by a question, and that question is, do we need another RuneScape? Well, Andrew Gower, one of the people behind the much beloved Number Go Upper game, thinks that the answer is yes, and has delivered to us Brighter Shores in an early access state. So let's take a little look, shall we? Launching the game takes me almost directly to a list of rules that I must accept. There's a small disclaimer stating that they would like to not have to have rules, but they're important to ensuring everyone has a good time. I accept these, and I definitely read the terms and conditions before being advertised the premium pass. This is standard free game practice, but at least let me try it out before trying to sell me more stuff. I was taking the notes on this page, and whilst doing so I was disconnected for inactivity, so I guess we're not allowed to consider our purchase for very long. Now we're into the character creation menu, which is nothing too remarkable. There's a decent number of options without any choice being too different from the last. I find the lack of purple hair disturbing, but it's not a deal breaker. My chosen name is available, and off we go. I find myself in an office and I'm told to click on things to learn about them. I ignore the person in front of me in favour of searching a chest and am rewarded with some copper coins. Then I sit on the captain's chair and steal her quill before talking to her. Captain Delgreen introduces herself and I find that I'm the newest recruit in the guard at Hopeport. There are some dialogue choices already that are nothing but joke options, which I obviously choose, and then I'm asked why I became a guard. There's an option for having no idea how I got here, but I go with the Mr. Krabs option instead. I'm told that a squad of guard were lost recently and that goblins were likely to blame. This is probably foreshadowing, but I have a feeling that story and quests are going to take a back seat. I head outside and speak to a mage and ask him for a demonstration of his magic, and he produces a silver coin from behind my ear. He lets me keep it and I'm suitably impressed, and then I head over to Corporal Binns for my next orders. I need to speak to the quartermaster to get a weapon, and I choose the stupid question, because obviously. I don't know what I expected. There are 3 weapon slots, which I later learn are one-handed, two-handed and ranged. These weapons can be cycled between during combat, but can only be switched from your inventory outside of combat, so make sure you plan ahead a little. There's some more dialogue from the NPCs with a choice between exposition and exposition with smart-ass remarks. The magic suppressor who enables me to use the spells tells me that I have an unusual aura, which I'm given to understand as a compliment these days, so thank you. I'm told to head to the portal stone in the north, and like a good boy I do so without hesitation, but I do stop to pick up a cabbage along the way and I'm sure that it will be useful later. The portal stone taught me the teleport spell, which works exactly as expected, but when I report back to the mage I have to do it again. Thanks for that. I'm also given the sense spell, which will highlight anything usable in the area. One click will highlight important things, whilst a double tap will highlight everything you can interact with. And then suddenly the alarm bells are ringing. There's a goblin attack and everyone is summoned to the defence of Hopeport. My job is to round up the other recruits, and whilst doing so, one of them asks me to find their bow. I go into the barracks and immediately start looting chests. A rare occurrence takes place in that the bow is not in the last place I looked, as I found it but continued to search chests afterwards. The bow is a quest item, and I'm told that quest items have their own storage and will not appear in the inventory. With everyone assembled, we're off to fight some goblins. Combat is almost exactly what I expected it to be, just click and watch numbers happen. It looks like these goblins might be inflicting fire damage, but I can't be certain yet. It seems that health resets between encounters, so I won't be spending time recovering between fights. This finely dressed gentleman, Marcus Mint, asks me to help move his wares away from the goblins. I ask if the goblins themselves aren't the more important task, but he insists, and well, I'm a good guard, so I will help this man. I'm sure the others have the goblins under control. I carry his box of stuff to a cart on the next screen where he pays me. Then one of the recruits appears to tell me I'm in trouble for wandering off. Captain Delgreen is injured, so I fetch the alchemist to help. He's out of healing potions, which is a convenient excuse to get me to do some more tutorial stuff. I need to go off and find some brown kelp, and on my way there I say hi to this little crab who seems rather happy. And then I find myself on a beach with the kelp that I need. I collect it, but I find out that I need to be a level 6 forager to pick up shells from the sand. Bringing the kelp back to the alchemist, I'm instructed to chop it at the preparation station, and then make a potion at the potion stand. The bottles that potions go in are filed under containers, which have a separate storage in the tool belt and will not appear in the inventory. The potions themselves, however, will. There looks to be quite a lot of potion-related equipment, but I'll have to learn about that later. The potion I've just made is enough to get the captain back on her feet. Then I'm taught the immunity spell, which will prevent enemies from attacking me. It can also be cast during battles to retreat, but the cast time is significant and should be done sooner rather than later. This timing is not something I will get the hang of anytime soon. The goblin threat is under control, and Corporal Binns tells me that my next objective is to get my total level to 60, and it's here that I realise that I'm playing RuneScape 3 too. I can now meet other players, but no thanks, I think I'd like to fish. And I can. I get myself a fishing spear, which is a profession item, and profession items have a, you guessed it, separate storage and will not appear in the inventory. I went to the beach and caught some flounders to start with, and I saw some eels under a bridge earlier. If this is going to capture that RuneScape feel, then I'm going to need a way to cook these fish, so that the feedback loop can provide infinite dopamine. But it looks like these particular flounders are not useful, so I just drop them on the floor. I do find the kitchen and begin cooking some bacon sandwiches, which is a very satisfying number go up activity. You buy your ingredients from Kevin outside, cook the meals, then sell them to the chef for infinite money. Kevin's inventory expands as you level up, and this is consistent among all vendors. You cannot purchase items that you are unable to use. I eventually unlocked the ability to boil the eels that I caught, and whilst cooking omelettes I had a poke around in the settings to discover full screen mode, so that annoying black bar at the bottom of your screen will go away now. Whilst sparring with the guards in the training ground, I find a halberd for increased poking power, and then I start finding equipment that is untuned. When I try to equip it, I'm told I need to complete the quest called Obelisk to learn about tuning. Then this message appears warning me that the game is going to be updated and I will be logged out soon, so I take a break. Equipping new gear brings up a comparison screen which has handy dandy green and red arrows to help at a glance. This is helpful, but having to open and close a new window each time gets a little tedious. Hovering over the item and getting a tooltip would be preferable. The items work on the now familiar rarity colour system because of course they do. I die whilst fighting, and other than being moved to the infirmary there doesn't seem to be any obvious consequences. I could, however, avoid death by not being an idiot and using health potions. It took me a while to notice that when I leveled my guard skill, the sparring guards changed to higher level ones. This change to enemy levels is displayed in the unlock screen that appears with every single skill increase, but it wasn't immediately obvious what it was trying to convey. I thought I was unlocking new enemies, but I didn't understand that the tougher versions were replacing the ones I was already fighting. Selling the items found from the sparring guards made me a decent amount of money, but I've no idea what I'd spend it on other than cooking ingredients. But at this time I'd like to find another place to train combat. I found some goblins, and it was here that I began to understand how the enemy scaling works. It gives me mixed feelings. On the one hand, enemies and areas stayed relevant throughout the game, but on the other, the sense of progression is harmed as a once safe place may become swarming with dangerous opponents. There are a number of cats roaming around, and you can pet each one of them. I wrote this note in big bold letters, so I'll let it stand on its own. Now I've reached guard level 15, I can get my bow training. It was not what I expected. Each ranged weapon has a limited ammo count based on the rarity colour, and restocks after each encounter. Basic weapons have 3 shots in them before you need to swap one of your other weapons, and they are used to simply get a few hits in before the enemy closes the gap. At this point there is no separate ranged weapon skill. I die, again, and death still means nothing. I'm not sure if I'm still receiving some kind of new player protection, or dying is in fact no big deal. I head to the gates and speak with a guard at the top who asks me to help with tuning 2 swords to Hopeport. There's an obelisk around here that I've actually walked past, and I need to use it to make these swords more effective within range of it. I get there to find that the obelisk is broken thanks to the recent goblin attack, and like a good main character, I offer to help fix it. It's missing a piece, and the guard trying to repair it believes it's somewhere downstream. I follow the water, and sure enough it's leaning against a wall. Upon taking it back, it turns out we can't fix the obelisk. The only clue we have to do so is on this stone tablet with some carvings on it. I'm directed to Nabeth, who may be able to help. Sure enough, she has some other stone tablets that are related in some way to the tablet that we already have. It's a match the squiggles puzzle, and when completed it summons a cryonite, who assumes there is some dire emergency. There's some dad jokes about it being tech support, which earned a out of me, and then I need to talk to the magic suppressor. He's very interested in the appearance of the knight, and lifts his magic restriction willingly. The cryonite then shoots magic at the obelisk and it can now be repaired, and now I can tune equipment whenever I find it, but I don't really know what that means yet. I bring the good news back to the guard and he lets me keep one of the swords for my trouble. I also gain a substantial amount of guard experience, so it was well worth doing. Later on I found a sword that's marked cryonite only, and this leads me to believe that there will be class choices later on. I also unlocked knowledge, or a knowledge point. I didn't quite understand what I was being told here, something about passive abilities, but everything was level locked. Some of this stuff becomes very easy to understand later on, but it's very insistent on not explaining itself clearly to begin with. What I do understand is that I need better equipment, and so I spend a decent chunk of time fighting stuff for better drops. So far as I can tell, there's no way to buy gear, and there's no obvious crafting mechanic for it either. Either way, my damage output is far too low, and I want to fix that. After a while, I get bored of fighting and decide to work on other professions, and the fact that gathering and fishing feed into the alchemy and cooking profession is quite satisfying. Clicking on enemies or fish that have upgraded offers a new choice of past action. Using this option, you can choose the previous form of the target, which will de-level enemies and their rewards and allow you to access the previous fish or forageable items. Whilst cooking, I unlock the chef's bounty board. Every hour, there's a new batch of orders that you can cook and deliver to townsfolk for a boost in experience and a chunk of change for your trouble. I rate this quite highly as a rewarding experience. Getting my overall level to 60 took me about 2 hours from character creation, but I was stopping a lot to take notes, so it would likely take much less in reality. The experience so far has been overall fun, with nice regular dopamine hits. Definitely following the RuneScape recipe, but there are 1 or 2 things that I took note of. The first thing would be the fishing. Each fish you see is only for you, so you won't be fighting with others to get there first. But since you're not in competition with anyone, having to move around and be temporarily exhaustible feels odd. For example, here on the eel bridge there are 3 eels on either side. I catch the first 3, run to the other side and catch the others, then run back to the first and wait for them to respawn. In a game that's simply about clicking and watching numbers go up, I'd prefer a spot that I could just stand in and keep clicking, maybe with a reduced reward per fish or a fail chance over walking back and forth, but that's a minor complaint. The second note is the chef's bounty board. 4 bounties per hour feels worse than 1 bounty per 15 minutes. Since the tasks are very small and manageable, you can have all 4 done in less than 10 minutes, leaving the rest of the hour to be static cooking. This runs completely counter to my point about the fishing and proves to me that sometimes you just can't win and I will always want what I don't have. But pointless complaints to one side, it's time to see Corporal Bins from my next objective. We're off to the Hope Forest where the next set of professions will become available. I'm told that all my stuff is tuned to Hopeport and not Hope Forest and will be weaker, which means I'll need a set for each area, and that feels a bit weird. I'll also have the Gatherer skill, which is exactly the same as foraging but only for the forest, which also feels off, but I'll explain that a bit more later. Myself and the other recruits are split into 2 groups. Those 2 go and hide, and me and this fellow will seek. We first follow the footprints, then we find a trampled mushroom, and now we've picked up their trail. My companion and I decide to split up at this junction, and I stumble upon a dryad being attacked by a level 10 mutant stag. Thinking level 10 is very low, I rush to aid them and proceed to get stomped into the ground. There are some very important things that I haven't quite grasped yet, and someone is furiously typing in the comments. Don't worry, I do figure it out. But before I figure it out, I just assume that my gear isn't up to scratch, so I spend a few hours grinding for better stuff. Which I do get, and I start to understand that the guard level doesn't mean much by itself, and that my gear level is what's important. But not before I get frustrated by being repeatedly beaten by enemies that are 4 guard levels below me. After getting a few upgrades, I decide to explore the possibility of using Alchemy to gain an advantage, but I find out that anything useful to me is locked behind my poor foraging skill, and so I go and do that for a while. Whilst exploring, I find this crumbled monument and lots of monument pieces a screen over, and discover that it's a sizable collectibles quest, spread over many foraging levels. The pieces themselves, however, look to be found in the same place each time and just change with levels, and so I expect a lot of time will be spent in these 3 areas. I'm then further confused when I find a trader that deals exclusively in monument pieces, but I assume he's a way to sell them once the quest is complete. A little while later, and I finally understand the knowledge points and the passive activities. Starting from level 20, each profession gets a way to be trained whilst offline, and these are unlocked by spending knowledge points on them. Passive training does not unlock these points, however, so there is no infinite passive loop to be exploited here. At this point I'm closing in on 10 hours of playtime and the UI is starting to feel like it's stuck in tutorial mode. The big clear images and boxes make it easy to understand for a beginner, but now that I'm more familiar with what I'm looking for, the menus feel huge and clunky. Only being able to see 2 rows in the store at a time, for example, makes using it and browsing a bit of a hassle. After a bit more grinding than I intended to do, I decide it's time to take another swing at the stag. On heading back to the forest, a lot of things suddenly click into place. You may not have had this problem, but I'm an idiot and I'm not ashamed of it. Scout is the combat skill for the forest and all my weapons are saying episode 1. This is a rather confusing tooltip and what it actually means is that these weapons are tuned to Hopeport and are currently useless. Something like not tuned to this zone would have been more helpful as episode 1 made me initially think that I was in a quest related encounter. It's now that I realise that I can fight these thugs to both train my scout level and begin farming gear. Either they weren't here before or I just wasn't paying attention, but now things make a lot more sense. Whilst grinding I find the Obelisk for Hope Forest, and I get a sudden idea. Maybe I can bring untuned gear here and boost myself with higher level equipment. It's a long shot, but I'm willing to try it. It took longer than I'd have liked because untuned stuff is quite rare, but eventually I get hold of a helmet and head back to try it out. I tune it but I'm unable to wear it because of my low scout level, which is what I expected, but hey, now I know for sure. I explore the forest for a while, discovering lots of trees I could cut if I had an axe, and lots of things I'll be able to gather after a significant grind. There's this creepy looking spider who's trapped someone, but that's not my problem yet, and I do come across the hub or town for the forest area. Here I find the satisfying woodcutting and carpentry loop among other things that I can't use yet. And I guess the grind just starts again here. There's definitely a certain amount of gratification to be had. Clicky number go uppy is, after all, one of my favourite game designs. The degrees of separation for professions between zones does, however, create the feeling that each area is functionally a different game. The lack of connectivity between the skills makes for a disjointed experience, and, at least so far, the only thing that could be considered part of the same package is that the items from the Gatherer skill will also benefit cooking and alchemy. There are also some things that I need to advance the story to unlock, like special attacks and what I anticipate to be a class system. And it's important to keep in mind that this is still early access. We are assured that there will be no save reset when the game moves to full release, so if you like what you've seen, then there's really no reason to not jump in, as there's a decent chunk of the game on offer for free. The last question for me to ask would be, do we really need another RuneScape? Between old school RuneScape, RuneScape 3 and Albion Online, one could argue that just these three titles offer more than enough of the same gameplay loop. But at the same time, people keep buying Call of Duty, so maybe more of the same is all that was needed. I'll most definitely come back to this for another video when the full release comes around, but until then you might find me casually playing. Thanks once again to the Patreon supporters for not cancelling because they forgot to, and of course thanks to you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.